talk. So here we are about to see a presentation about how we can move from 7 seconds in a Java application to 160 milliseconds in a Java application. By the way, here there are some stickers for from Quarkus, so if you want to grab them at the end. During my presentation, I have several videos or GIFs about retro games, not in this case. It would be nice if some of you guess all the names of the video games and tweet about it at the end. Okay, it's a quiz. Let's see. Okay, so I'm Jonathan Vila, and I'm passionate about Java. I've been nominated as Java champion. I'm also community driven. I've been one of the leaders of the Barcelona Java user group since 2012, and also founder of, well, co-founder and organizer of the JVCN Conf. It's a conference in Barcelona with 7 editions, now rebranded as the BCN. That happens in 2 weeks. So I'm very nervous at the moment, especially if the clicker doesn't work. Okay, so as speaker experience, I've been talking in several conferences. This is my first time at JCon, and it's been a pleasure to be here and being selected as speaker. Hope I will not bore you to death. I've been developer since, I don't know, 30 years ago. I have started with Pascal and C, and then moved across different languages, even PHP. By the way, has anybody here used Delphi in the past? Okay, nice. Here there is a QR code. If you want to know more about me, just simply go there and check. And my professional work, where I've been working, these are the latest companies: NetCentric, Okada Technology, Red Hat, and also Tetrade. And now I'm working as a developer advocate for Sonar. Probably some of you know about it. Sonar is a company that produces SonarLint, SonarCube, and SonarCloud. These are static analysis applications that basically analyze your code and tell you, well, which are the things that you should improve in order to get to a clean code approach. Does anybody uses Sonar? Any Sonar tool? SonarLint? Okay, the rest that are not using SonarLint, just check it. You can use also SonarCloud, that it is free for public repositories. So let's go deep into this presentation. So it's about migrating a Spring Boot application into Quarkus. Now I'm going to explain why I decided to migrate. By the way, here you have the QR for the slides. So if you want to check them after the talk, that's okay. So what can you? So this is the agenda for the presentation. What you can expect of this. Also, why I decided to migrate. I had several things to do at home. So migrating a Spring Boot application into Quarkus, that was not part of my job. Well, probably I had better things to do. So why I decided to migrate. Then I will explain a bit what is Quarkus. Some of you has ever heard about Quarkus. Perfect. And the rest are using Quarkus in production, right? Okay, fine. It's going easy. Okay, so I will explain for you what is Quarkus, what is coding with Quarkus, and also 2 different features that they have introduced in the latest versions, that it is the Quarkus CLI and the Quarkus development environment. It's very nice to use this CLI because it makes things even easier. You will see it. Then I will introduce GraalVM. It's a tool that will help us to reach those 160 milliseconds that I was telling you about before. But you need something real in order to migrate to see, well, if this is worth it or not. So I will explain, or I will give you details about which is the project that I decided to migrate. Okay, and so let's focus on what can you expect on this presentation. So it's about migrating a Spring Boot application that is on version 3 to Quarkus version 3.0.4, but that's not important. So here you are going to see my opinion. So I'm not teaching you anything, just showing my experience, and then you can get out of it what do you want. So this is something that works because the migration works, but it's nothing that I put a lot of effort into making the most performance possible, the tool. So the point was just to do a fast migration and see the results. And what you are going to see is not the way. Some of you are following the Mandalorian. None? You? Okay. Okay, but so for you, this is not the way. So we are not going to follow the Mandalorian principle. This is only one way. So, why I decided to migrate? My experience with Spring Boot is that it's very easy to develop with. So its main purpose is to make you life easier when you are coding. That's for sure. But in my experience, it took long startup time. So when you are creating an application and you start it, it takes a lot to start. And also, it takes a lot to run the tests. Also, it's a heavyweight application. So when you run it, it consumes a lot of memory. And this is a particular thing. There are a lot of things happening under the hood. So I don't like that. I like to have more control about what it is happening. And they told me Quarkus is easy to develop applications. Fine, that's great for me. That it is fast, lightweight, and also GraalVM compatible. Therefore, I can create native artifacts and go to a serverless environment. Because at the moment, the most chosen option to go to serverless is using Node.js or Python. So what if we can use Java to go serverless? Okay, let's explore that. So let's start with a brief description about Quarkus. So basically, Quarkus is a native stack that you can use Java, Kotlin, or Scala. That it is, from the very beginning, is designed having Kubernetes in mind. So it's going to produce native artifacts using GraalVM or hotspot, so the regular JVM artifacts that you need a JVM to run. But also an important thing about Quarkus is that it is using standard libraries. So it's using Kafka or Hibernate or REST-easy or Vertex. We will see some of them. But it's not reinventing the wheel, so you don't need to learn new tricks. So basically, the idea that you should have in mind is Quarkus is producing applications that are way faster, way smaller in terms of memory footprint, focused on being easy to code, so you don't need to learn new tricks. It's open source, it's important for me. Has fast-paced releases, so they are releasing a new version every 2 weeks with new features, bugs fixes, but why not new bugs also? So, but they are producing a lot of code very often, and they have tons of extensions. Tons, I mean more than 600 extensions. So extension is basically a library that you are using, optimized to be used by Quarkus. So it's hard that you are not going to find the library that you're using in the list that they are supporting. Kafka, Camel, Keycloak, I don't know, Microprofile, OpenShift, well, you name it, Flyway, Hibernate, up to more than 600. You can check them in their website. Quarkus started in the end of 2018, and they have released lots of versions. Now, well, in May, they released the 3.04 version. So they are releasing constantly and with a lot of new features inside. Basically, what it is said about Quarkus is that, you can see here the gray bar that is around 140 megabytes. This is with a traditional stack, and we can move to 12 megabytes of memory if we use Quarkus and native artifacts. But in terms of starting time, we can go from more than 9 seconds to 42 milliseconds. This is giving this is with a given application in the 3 different options. So time and memory consumption is the key for Quarkus. Also, it's not a project that it has few committers behind. They have more than 800 contributors, lots of new issues and new features added, and even they have a repository or an organization where a lot of people are submitting new extensions. So they are producing extensions for their own libraries, and they are publishing here in the Quarkiverse hub. But let's see, this is difficult. Let's see what it is coding with Quarkus. It's a matter of adding 2 dependencies, well, in this case 2 dependencies because I'm testing, 2 dependencies to the POM. And voila, we have Quarkus. And coding with Quarkus is, well, you don't see it. You are using JAX-RS, creating endpoints. So no mention of Quarkus here in the code, okay? Even if we are injecting bins, we are using standard annotations. So we are using the standard libraries that we've been using for all the projects. Even with testing, in this case, we are using Quarkus test. This is a new annotation. But for the rest, it's very easy. We can even use create command line applications with PicoCli library, and it's easy. Maybe install, maybe Quarkus dev, maybe Quarkus remote dev, because we can have a dev environment. Then Quarkus will start your application, and if you change something, you will see live results. The same it happens with a remote environment, so we can have this live deploying feature. But even going to native, it's just adding native in the command line. And then we are moving from having a JVM hotspot application into a native artifact. So let's see what it is, the command line interface and development environment. So we can install Quarkus with SDKman, JBang, or Homebrew, or other libraries. I use SDKman because it's easy for me to maintain different Java versions, but you can use several. And you can create with this command line, you can create applications directly, Quarkus create app, that's it. It will create all the skeleton and all the things that you need. You can create applications, command line applications, or even extensions. You can build them with Quarkus. Quarkus build, and you specify the destination, JVM, native, or a Docker image. Even you can run the application, Quarkus dev, Quarkus test, Quarkus interactive, because, well, they have added an interactive mode where you can interact with your application that it is running, getting logs and other things. And even you can deploy the application directly. So you are just simply saying Quarkus deploy where? Kubernetes, OpenShift, Knative, or even a local cluster if you're using Kind or Minikube. And Quarkus will create the deployment YAMLs and will deploy it in the cluster. Command line is easy. Quarkus create app, Quarkus build, Quarkus dev. It's very easy to handle application, and then you just focus on coding. Okay, so now we know why we are here. We know what it is Quarkus. Was it clear what it is Quarkus for those that you don't know what is Quarkus? No? It was not clear? Okay, hopefully yes. So now we have Quarkus, also what it is, and then we need another tool. We need GraalVM to go to native. In the case of Quarkus, they are not using directly GraalVM. They are using a fork called Mandrel. Basically, GraalVM is something, a stack, that will produce native artifacts. It's one of the features coming from different languages. So it has polyglot support, and then it can move applications for the different languages to JVM or to native. It can produce applications for JVM, or it can produce applications directly with a native artifact that doesn't need a JVM to run. Even there's another option that you can even run Java on a feature called truffle. Then you can interact with different applications in different languages. So it's about having Java, GraalVM in the middle, and a native artifact on the edge. And building with Graal, just having this hello world very simple application, it's a matter of installing the Graal JVM, JDK. Then we are installing the native image feature. We are compiling hello world. We are creating the native image hello world, and then we execute it, and we will see the output. This is the log for the generation of the native artifact, but you see there are several steps, but Quarkus will make this very simple. So I said that Quarkus is not using GraalVM directly. It's using Mandrel. And what it is Mandrel? It's basically the Red Hat downstream, because it's maintained by them, of GraalVM. It has OpenJDK instead of Oracle Labs JDK, and it's focused on Java. So the other languages are not taken into consideration. Therefore, there are some things that Mandrel doesn't have because they don't need those features. No truffle, so no polyglot, because it's only focused on Java. And the other thing is that no Sulong is a library that will have the capability to create native artifacts for different languages. As it is only interested on Java, these things are not interested. And it's going to use a default image to produce the native artifact when we say to Quarkus we want to produce a native artifact and we don't have GraalVM installed. It will download the image and it will run it. So it's easy for us. So the project that started to migrate is a simple application. It's a simple REST application. It has few entities, endpoints. It's about a pet clinic demo application. So it should be easy to migrate. That's the point of this. It's simple. It has some features that everyone is using in several projects, and let's experience how easy it is to migrate. So this Spring Pet Clinic has all of those libraries: data, web, security, documentation, Swagger, actuators, micrometers, CDI, aspect-oriented, and catch. So well, there are several libraries that are used commonly in several projects. But in Quarkus, we need to move to other libraries. We need to go to Panache, JAX.rs, Quarkus Security, OpenAPI, SmallRide, well, different libraries. So we need to do a migration. So now we know what is Quarkus, we know what is GraalVM, we know which is the project. So let's see which are the migration steps. Basically, with the CDI, it's a string replace. We are going to replace the annotation, auto-wired by inject. That's it. It also has auto-injection on constructors, and also it's lazy by default. So it's easy, just string replace. Also, it has JPA repositories using Hibernate Panache, and what we have to do is just simply implement Panache repository. In this case, it's Panache repository based because we need to specify which is the class for the identity. In this case, it's an integer because the default one is a long. But it's easy. Just implement this class, this interface, and we will have the methods, the usual methods to interact with entities. But there's a drawback. There are no derived query methods. So those methods, find by name and age, that internally are generated into queries, are not available. with the Spring REST, it's a matter of moving from the Spring REST library to JAX.RS. We need to string replace annotations, or if it's the request mapping one that includes several arguments, well, we need to break it down into several annotations. With the security, well, we need to move from pre-authorized to roles allowed. The only difference here is that in Spring, you can specify, you can have an expression language in the security. So you can see here that it is using has role and the role. So we are using an expression language. We don't have that in Quarkus, so you need to specify all the roles as a list. This is the difference. Also, the security was persisted into a database, which is the table for users, passwords, and we need to do the same with Quarkus. But the thing is that for Quarkus, it's a matter of adding a dependency to Elytron, and then we use the properties file and we configure which is the mapping between users and passwords and roles. With cross origin is very easy. Just adding two properties to the properties file, and that's it. The only thing is that in Spring, we can configure this per controller, but in Quarkus, I didn't find a way to do it, and it is globally enabled, globally configured. With metrics, in this case for Spring, it is using aspect-oriented programming. Anybody is using AOP in their projects? Okay. It's very complex, but it's very powerful. So what you are saying here, we will see now, with AOP is saying, okay, for every method in a repository, execute this before and execute this after. And this will be done for all the methods for the repositories. In this case, this project was using AOP to get the metrics of access to the database. With Quarkus, initially, we should annotate all the methods that we want to have metrics with these annotations. Counted or timed, and then we will get the metrics in the metrics file. Even we can enable the micrometer compatibility because metrics are not exactly the same, but with micrometer compatibility we will have them. As I said before, they are using AOP. Here you can see that it is creating an aspect, and it is saying around every method that it is a child of repository, execute this. So what it is doing is getting the time, invoking, and getting the time, and then subtracting, we have the duration. With Quarkus, well, it's difficult because we don't have AOP. But what we can have is a property in the properties file, this Quarkus Hibernate ORM metrics enabled true. And this will enable all the metrics to access to the database. So we didn't have to do anything just to get the same metrics or more than with the AOP in Spring. So for this particular case, it was even easier. In order to validate the endpoints, well, we need to move from controller advice to exception mapper. As you can see, the code is very, very similar, but yes, you need to modify the code. But well, it wasn't too much modification, but it was. With Swagger, well, what we have is either we configure it on the properties file, or we extend an application class specifying all the general information for our API. It's very easy. With this, we will have all the information for the API. The drawback is that with Quarkus, I didn't find a way to hide endpoints. That with Spring, you can specify which are the paths to be scanned in order to be included in the Swagger configuration. I didn't find that the way to do it with Quarkus, so it's all or nothing. With local caching, it's more or less the same. It's similar implementation. We are going to add the catch result into a method that we want to catch the information, and that's it. It's a string replace, basically. And we can configure the behavior of this catch in the properties file, specifying the initial capacity or even the size for this catch. Testing. Testing, it's about moving from mock MVC to rest assured. You need to change everything. Code is not similar. You need to change effectively everything. So that was a problem when I did the migration. Even there is no role simulation. So when you are testing, you need to have effectively a user that is belonging to a role in order to simulate that a role can execute a method. Another important feature is test resources. When you are testing, usually you are using in-memory resources. So instead of using Postgre database, you are using an H2. I think there is another approach that is even better, that it is using test containers, and then you are using the real thing. But that's another discussion. In this case, using memory resources, in this case H2, well, it's very easy. Just simply specify which is the test resource, and Quarkus will start this resource for you, and you will start using a database that it is running in memory. Easy. And with testing, the injection or CDI, it's very easy. Just use the inject mock annotation, and you will have the bin injected in your test. But I have to say that we've lost around 20 minutes of this talk. Forget about what I said. It's not the way. There's another way of doing things, easier, faster, and simpler. That it is using Spring extension for Quarkus. So with the Spring extension, you are going to use the Spring interface with the Quarkus implementation. So in this case, we have extensions for dependency injection, for web API, data, REST, security, you name it, several extensions that are using the same interface as Spring is using. But it will be Quarkus who is going to take care of the build and produce a different code. So for instance, if you have your code using Spring REST, basically don't touch anything. Just simply have your code. Quarkus will take care of it and will produce the right artifact. It can be that you are using special features that you need to check if the extension is covering. But I would say that for the majority of users, the Spring extensions are fine. So if you are having dependency injection used from Spring in your application, just moving the initial dependency from Spring to Quarkus and the same code, and you don't need to touch anything, because Quarkus is covering most of the annotations for each library, even for Spring data. And in this case, we can have derived query methods. So those find by name and age, Quarkus will use this interface and will produce the right method. For security, the same. So even we can have expressions in the roles. So it's easy just to keep the same code and don't change anything. It will be Quarkus who builds the application. But I assume that you are wondering at this moment, okay, this is a lot of things that this guy has told me, but is it really worth it? Because if we are saying that Spring takes 7 seconds and Quarkus takes 6 seconds, probably it's not really worth it. So let's see which are the numbers that I had when I did the 3 compilations. So we are moving from the first compilation, taking the original source code and compiling, that it will take 7 seconds to start. And it will consume around 500 megabytes in memory, 430. This is a lot. If you want to go to Kubernetes and have fast scale up, it's a lot of time. And if you want to go to serverless, definitely is a no-go. 7 seconds is a lot. But if we just move to Quarkus, it's not important which of the 2 approaches you use. If you go to Quarkus, we are going from 7 seconds to around 3 seconds. So definitely there's a lot of improvement here. And also in memory, we are moving to more or less half of the memory. That could mean that if you are putting applications in Kubernetes, where you had 1 application, now you can have 2. So you can multiply by 2 the density of your cluster. That's important also if you are considering horizontal scale. But if we add -p native to the command line, just that, -p native 8 characters. If you add 8 characters in the command line, we are moving from 7 seconds to 160 milliseconds. Just to start, same thing. Not touching anything else, just only adding 8 characters in the command line. And we are moving from more than 400 megabytes in memory to just only 80 megabytes in memory. So that means that only in memory I can multiply by 5, but only in time I can multiply by, I don't know, a lot. Okay? So have this in mind, that from the starting point, 7 seconds, in the finish point, we have 160 milliseconds. And more importantly, that just going from Quarkus JVM to Quarkus native, it only takes 8 characters to go from 3 seconds to 160 milliseconds. But I have to mention too, Spring has a native mode now. So they released in April Spring Boot 3 that has capabilities of generating native artifacts. I have to say that I've tried to do the migration or to do the native compilation with the Spring Boot Clinic, and I didn't succeed. Probably I need to try it more and check different options, but I was investing some time and I didn't make it to work. But eventually it will work. So because they are putting a lot of effort too in that. So you need to check this approach too. I prefer the Quarkus approach because of the different libraries that are not related with Spring, that are not related even with Quarkus. So it gives me freedom. But it's a matter of choices. Just simply try them all and then decide. And then you need to migrate projects from 2.7 to 3.0. You can use Open Rewrite to do that, but you can do it manually too, or you can follow the instructions. So, well, try it and just decide by yourself. So, we've reached the more or less the end of the presentation, and I will give you some references if you want to go deeper into this topic. Basically, the links to the GitHub repositories, and the second one, that it is in my account, it has the Quarkus branch, that it is exactly the migration from the original one to the Quarkus version. And also you have the Quarkus website, the Quarkus Twitter handle, the URL for tutorials online, free, very, very interesting. And also the mailing list. If you have any problem, you just simply send an email to the mailing list and they will help you. If you want to try Quarkus, you can use the Developer Red Hat courses Quarkus, where you will have all these tutorials for free, but more importantly, everything is running in the cloud. So you have an IDE, you have a command line, but nothing is running in your machine. Everything is running on the cloud. And so if you want to try and don't want to mess and invest time on checking right versions or anything, just try these tutorials, and yeah, you can just learn different topics: reactive, Hibernate, SQL, monitoring, templating, Hibernate, Kafka. Even for Spring developers, there's a specific course about this. By the way, I'm not related at all to Red Hat. Also, there's a cheat sheet, a document that it is maintained and kept up to date with all the features that every new release is adding to Quarkus. So it's important that you check this document, and you will see which are the things that have been added. Also, starting point for Quarkus is just going to code.quarkus.io. You select which are the libraries that you want to include in your application, and it will produce a package that you can download and start coding on it. It will even create a test and an endpoint. Same is the same if you use the Quarkus command line, but you can use it on the web too. It's not that I say that Quarkus can improve productivity. These are real use cases from companies. I assume that you all know, at least the first and the third, you all know these companies. These are big companies, and they have migrated from Spring Boot to Quarkus. So if they have done it, probably it's because they know something important. So I totally encourage you that if you visit the slides, just check the link with the real use case study, and then you can see by yourself that, well, how these companies did the migration. And basically that's all. Here you have the QR, and please, I would love if you rate me. Even with bad score, that helps me to improve and to give better talks next time. You have the QR with the slides. My Twitter handle, if you want to follow me, send me questions. I will try to answer them. My blog, where you can find articles for this and other topics. And that's all. Thank you very much. Danke, and hope you enjoyed the session. Can you repeat, please? Oh yeah, in that grid that I showed before, probably I can show. Here you have the comparison between the JVM and the native. Exactly. This is the startup time. Yes. Only focusing on startup time. Yes. Well, in this case, it's exactly. It can be exactly the same, because if you are using lazy initialization of the beans, you are going to have the same experience in Spring that in Quarkus. But the difference in the performance on the startup time, when you haven't received any request yet, is basically because Quarkus is using ahead of time compilation in this case. So it's doing a lot of things on build time. So when you start the application, those things are already done. With the Spring, it's doing just in time. So a lot of things are going to happen in runtime. So when Spring starts, it needs to discover the beans, initialize classes and objects. A lot of things need to happen on runtime exactly at the very beginning. But with Quarkus, a lot of this work has been done on build time. This has also drawbacks. So you can have a way of having dynamic loading, but basically that means that everything has to be defined before build time. That's why, for instance, reflection is something that can penalize a lot this thing. So Quarkus needs libraries that have been optimized to be working with Quarkus. So if you are trying to use a library that it is not optimized to work with Quarkus, it won't work.
So would all of this also apply if you use the Quarkus Spring wrapper that you mentioned earlier?
Yes, because in the end, this Quarkus Spring extension is only the interfaces. So what they have done is, okay, we have the Spring library that it is defining a lot of interfaces. Let's copy exactly the same interfaces, but we are going to inject a different implementation. Therefore, you are thinking you're using a Spring, but you are using Quarkus.
With all the performance gains.
Exactly with the same performance gains. Yeah. So you reach that point no matter which of the two approaches that I've shown you use. Either with a manual transformation or either using the Spring library. I did the same, and more or less the times are exactly the same. More questions? Oh, sure. I should check, but from what I know at the moment that I did the migration, these were the libraries or the extensions covered by Quarkus. So sure, definitely Spring has way more extensions that if you are using one of them, then you cannot use this approach, definitely. You need to check one by one. No. So you need to go, everything that you use in Quarkus needs to be optimized to be in Quarkus. And so you cannot mix, at least not the default way. You could tweak a lot of things, but then you should not gain this performance improvement.